I hope Weasel's all right. I like her.
He's very young, Fox.
Yeah, he'll get over it. Here she comes.
I followed them down to the pond. Then Weasel hid and Measly started looking for her. And now they've both disappeared.
Disappeared?
Playing hide and seek, as if they had nothing better to do.
Hide and seek? That's what Weasel did with Scarface. Weasel, master of disguise. Remember how she hid from him?
She hid from us, too.
Yeah, poor Weasel. Well, she was in trouble whichever way she jumped. Once I saw her running about inside this log. She thought if she couldn't see us, we couldn't see her. Trouble was, she couldn't see anything, so she kept bumping into things.
And then there was the time we needed sentries to guard our land, and Kestrel went looking for her. Of course, Kestrel returned in a state of confusion to tell me of a long conversation she had with a gorse bush. So much for Kestrel's famous eyesight. But of course, I knew.
We were in the grip of winter. The snow had been with us for months. There was no food, apart from what we'd scavenged from the farms and houses on the edges of the park. Al, Whistler, Vixen and me went out most nights, bringing back all sorts of stuff. Meat and fish from the bins, vegetables, anything we could lay our paws on or carry in our beaks. Well, it kept us alive, but only just. It was bitterly cold. And Scarface still prowled our boundaries, hoping to starve us out of the park.
And then the warden went away. I saw him carried from his house and put into a white van. Soon after, his cat left too in a cage, meowing pitifully.
Our protector had gone. Late at night, as we huddled together under the trees, I saw shadows across the snow, human shadows. Then a shot rang out across the crisp night air, and a deer, one of my own, lay dead. As I watched them drag her body after them, I knew the poachers would be back. The deer trembled. Who would be next?
But the deer had helped us. They'd shared their hay with us. Now it was our turn. We had to help them. We decided to set up a watch. Whistler and Kestrel.
What?
It's all right, Whistler. I'm just telling Husky about the poachers. You and Kestrel kept watch for them in the woods.
Oh, yes, that's true. Kestrel couldn't fly, of course, not properly anyway. She was still recovering from that cat's attack on her. My wife, Speedy, was feeding her. I think my wife must have begun to understand the oath by then. Well, at least a little. Anyway, she did well by Kestrel.
She did, Whistler. She did.
Shall we get back to the story? They were keeping watch in the wood, while I took on the more arduous task of patrolling the park boundary.
We couldn't have done it without you, Al.
Thank you, I'm sure. I must say it's nice to be appreciated. Unfortunately, someone who shall be nameless, someone so recently praised for her charitable works, almost ruined the whole thing.
I say.
Whistler's mate had decided to keep him company on his watch, and she just wouldn't stop talking.
It's true. She went on and on about the moon and how romantic it was. Just like tonight, really. I tried to get away from her, but she just followed me, talking all the time. Oh, look, she said, there's Badger. Hello, Badger. Is he keeping watch too? Then it was Fox's turn. He had his eye on a stoat, first morsel that would have passed his lips in days. But she shouted from above, Hello, Fox. Hello, Vixen. And of course, the stoat ran off. And when Fox complained, she got all upset, saying, I didn't have to come out tonight in the cold, cold snow, keeping watch for your friends. Too unselfish, that's my trouble. Well, it's the last time. And then she flew back to the pond and left us in peace.
And then we saw a shadow.
I ran to the stone circle to warn the stag. He rounded up his herd and started them off running into the thickets where the men couldn't follow. But too late. One of the stragglers was shot.
Not your fault, Fox. Your warning saved most of us.
It wasn't enough for me. I knew that if we couldn't put a stop to those poachers, Stag would have to lead the herd out of the park. And if we lost Stag, well, Scarface would have a field day. Then, as I was standing there, not an idea in my head, something happened. A drop of water fell onto my head from the tree above. I looked up and I smiled.
Fox had an idea.
Oh, now what's wrong?
It's Measley. I was hiding from him and he didn't come to find me.
Al said he was hiding too.
The whole purpose of hide-and-seek, Weasel, is that one of you should hide while the other seeks. If, unfortunately, Measley also was hiding, who was left to seek?
What's it like being right all the time?
Awful.
Oh, well, I suppose he'll realise I'm not looking for him eventually. Where have we got in the story?
Aren't you going back to look for him?
What for?
You said you were lonely without him.
Oh, that was then.
Unfortunately, the same stoat saved by Speedy's warning overheard Fox's plan and went to see Scarface. Scarface was angry. Fox had a plan, and the weasel had failed to tell him.
Angry? He was spitting feathers, he was. I don't know anything, I told him. I haven't asked you anything yet, he said. He was a bit of a clever clogs as well as a big bully. Anyway, I didn't know anything, but that made him madder than ever. So I tried to run away from him, but my legs still hurt from the last time and it slowed me down. Lucky for me, we were near the pond. I limped onto the ice, Scarface followed and fell, splat!
However, Stoat's betrayal also had repercussions for Fox.
Yeah. The next night, we set up sentries again, like before, only this time Hare joined us, keeping his ear to the ground, literally. Hares can hear better than anybody.
It's them huge ears they've got.
Yeah, well, Hare had his huge ear to the ground. Suddenly, he hears something. The earth was vibrating. Then Kestrel saw something and started cawing at us. So I ran to the stone circle. "Stand by," I said. "They're coming." Then I ran back, meaning to draw the men towards the pond. At first, the men ignored me. Then I stood right in their path and screamed. They took a proper look at me then, and they recognized me as the fox that had got in their way the last time, so they decided to hunt me down. It was just what I wanted. I drew them on through the woods, zigzagging, like you do when the hounds are after you. They kept falling over branches and into holly bushes. Talk about stealth. You could hear their cries for miles around. But they weren't stupid. I had one or two narrow escapes, when suddenly the trees thinned out and they were able to get me in their sights. But the nearer they got to me, the keener they were. I led them further on, till at last we were getting near the pond. The moon was full. Its light reflected in the snow, making everything look ghostly blue. The men were getting tired. I could sense they were about to give up, so I decided to give them some encouragement. I came out of the bushes and stood right in their path, looking at them. One of them raised his gun. I stood still, waiting. Then Vixen called, "Now!" and I ran. The man swore and dropped his gun, and then they came on after me as before.
I had been following the chase all along, and now I went to the stag who had gathered his herd in front of the pond. I told him to stand by.
For the deer, it was a test of nerves. Men with guns were being drawn towards them, but they must not run. They had to stand their ground. I could hear Fox getting nearer, and then There was confusion. Another fox was near. I turned my head and saw Scarface. Perhaps Fox, too, sensed Scarface's presence because he seemed to hesitate for a moment before running on towards us, the men on his heels. I gave the order, and the line of deer parted, letting Fox through onto the ice of the pond. The men followed, their guns raised, but Fox was well ahead. He'd plenty of time to get away, or he would have had if it had not been for Scarface. Suddenly, Scarface appeared, rushing onto the pond, preventing Fox's escape. The men were nearer. They stepped onto the ice, guns raised high. As one of them pulled the trigger, he slipped, and the bullet whined harmlessly into the air. Scarface turned and ran, and Fox skidded to the edge of the pond. Then the second man started after him. Suddenly, there was a loud crack. The man looked down. The ice parted beneath him, and he fell, screaming into the icy blackness of the water. We could not stand and gloat. I gave the command, and my herd moved clear. Fox, too, was safe, and Scarface's plan to have him shot had failed.
The park rejoiced at the news of the victory over the poachers. But it was Vixen's news that made me happy. Because it was then, she told me, she was expecting cubs.
Was one of them my father?
It was, Husky. One of those cubs was to be your father. Bold.
At last, the thaw started, and everyone felt relief. Suddenly, we could dig holes in the soft ice and reach the fish.
Small rodents started to appear, so we could eat too, and soon the plant eaters could see the green of the grass.
I find this next bit very hurtful.
Well, would you like to go away for a bit of a hunt while we tell this bit then, Al?
No, thank you. I prefer to tell it myself, to make sure Husky hears the true story of my betrayal.
Oh, dear.
We had continued the airlift of food from the surrounding farms all through the intensely cold winter weather. But now the thaw had begun. Fox decreed that the airlift could finally stop. Unfortunately, he failed to tell me.
Oh, come on, Al, be fair. I thought Kestrel and Whistler would be bound to pass it on.
So I kept on, night after night, flying out of the park, fetching carrots, scraps of meat, and anything I could find, and all from the goodness of my heart. How did you not notice, Fox?
We had other things on our minds, Al. Rabbit was the first to produce young, then there was the hares, and
There's no excuse.
Toad woke up and started off towards the pond. What's so funny?
I know something you don't.
What?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Yes, I would. And if you don't tell me soon, I'll bite your blooming head off.
All right, no need to get ratty. It's Toad. You know when he hopped past earlier on,
Yes.
and he hopped off,
Yes.
making for his pond?
Yes.
Well, he was going the wrong way.
Oh no, it's happened again. He's not making for our pond here in the park. He's making for Farthing blooming Wood. Oh, why didn't you say something?
Well, you told me to shut up.
A toad's homing instinct is too deep set to be overruled. It has a logic all its own. I remember...
All right, Al, no need to give us a lecture, we know.
Tell you what, I'll go after him, fetch him back.
Oh, no, you don't. You are going to stay here and have your beak rubbed in it.
That's what I'm afraid of. I'd have been better off staying at home.
Thanks, Whistler.
My pleasure, I can assure you.
Whistler cannot escape his responsibility for what happened. Why, if it wasn't for Badger, I would be airlifting food even now. I remember I had brought him some meaty titbits, which he received most gratefully. He was a gentleman, unlike some. And he said to me, "Thank you very much, Owl." But why? Fox cancelled the airlifts ages ago. Well, I said, no one told me. I was deeply hurt. I seemed to be the only one keeping the oath, I told him. Of course, he said that wasn't true. And I said, well, Badger, you might be doing it, but who else? Fox didn't breathe a word to me about his change of plan, neither did Whistler or Kestrel. As for Hare, he doesn't even live on Farthing Land, while Weasel hasn't been seen in ages. In fact, last time she was sighted, she was a gorse bush. Nothing to boast about, Weasel. I had been betrayed and humiliated by my best friends. I couldn't bear to see them, didn't go near them, none of them. I kept myself to myself and indulged in rather a lot of brooding. Then one day, when I was sitting on a tree branch reflecting on the unfairness of life and the treachery of others, I saw the poachers again. I knew I should have gone straight to Fox to tell him, but I just couldn't face him. Not after...
Don't take on, Owlie.
The name is Owl. I hate diminutives.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Granted. So, I kept what I had seen to myself. And then I heard gunshot. My heart sprang into my throat.
Painful.
Be quiet. Of course, I feared the worst. And then Speedy came along. Oh, without a buy you or leave you, she landed right beside me, sharing my perch. And, of course, she started chattering on in her usual way about how a fox had been killed by the poachers. I was beside myself. Fox was dead, and it was all my fault. Excuse me. I simply can't go on. I'm so sorry.
Now, off making a meal of it, ain't she?
I still feel badly.
Why should you? Anyway, I had a much worse time than her.
But if it wasn't you who got killed, Grandad, who was it?
It was a blue fox. Remember how when Fox here was drawing the poachers on into the wood, the moon was shining on the snow and everything looked blue?
I get it. The poachers thought it was a blue fox leading them on.
Exactly.
Oh.
So that when they returned to the park, it wasn't a red fox they were looking for, but a blue. And you can imagine how Scarface felt when they gunned down one of his sons. He'd already lost 2 cubs at the farm. Now he had lost another, an older son, a warrior, and very useful to his tribe. Slavering for revenge, Scarface sought out Weasel.
I told you I had a worse time, didn't I? Well, soon as I saw him coming, I pretended to be a fern.
How'd you do that?
I'll show you. You grab a handful of fern leaves, and you hold one in front of you and one behind, and then, hey presto, you've turned into a plant.
Wouldn't take me in.
No, didn't take him in either. I was at his mercy. He wanted me to take a message to Fox. I had to tell Fox that Scarface blamed him for the death of his son and that he was going to get him for it. Well, I didn't have any choice, did I? I've been keeping out of everybody's way for ages, and now I had to go and seek them out. When I told Fox what Scarface had said, he was furious. Soon as I'd said my piece, I scarpered.
Vixen pointed out that Weasel was limping, but I wouldn't listen. I'd got myself into a proper state. Thing is, I blame myself for the death of that fox. Scarface was right. I had brought the wrath of the poachers down on our heads. And would they be satisfied with having killed one fox? Every fox in the park was at risk. What had I done?
As always in times of crisis, I went up to the stone circle to think. It was, as we have said, spring, and, as now, I had no antlers, so that when Weasel came by, she did not recognize me.
Antlers? What are they?
Great big things like tree branches they are, stick straight out of his head. Look at him, he don't believe me.
Oh, it's quite true, Husky, and in the autumn you shall see for yourself, because they will have grown by then. But though Weasel did not recognize me, I recognized her. I asked her, "Aren't you one of the Farthing creatures?" To my surprise, she denied it and ran off. Things had come to a pretty pass. I decided it was time to do something about it, so I went down to Farthing Land and sought out Fox.
Stag had a plan, and a very brave plan it was. He said if we, the Farthing animals, could drive the poachers towards the herd, he would get them to charge. Well, have you stags in full charge? Nothing and no one could stand in their path. So, once again, we set sentries to watch the park boundaries. And it was then, when we needed her, that I missed Owl. I sent Kestrel to find her.
Of course, she apologized, and quite right too.
Back on form, eh, Al?
I brought a titbit for Husky.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, Al.
Not at all.
Takes me back, eh, Al?
Yes, when your cubs were born.
Scarface and Lady Blue had already produced their young. Now it was Vixen's turn. She had 4 lovely cubs, 2 females and 2 males. We called the females Charmer and Dreamer, and we called the males Friendly and Bold. Dreamer was always going off on her own. In a world of her own, she was. And she wasn't the only one. Poor old Badger, worried about his old friend Mole, wandered off looking for him. We hoped against hope Mole would be found, but in our hearts, we knew that age and a cold winter had probably killed him. But the park was wakened suddenly by the sound of shooting. Birds flew into the air, rabbits dived for cover, and Stag, up at the stone circle, gathered his herd for action. As soon as they were in sight, Stag lowered his head and charged. The rest of the herd followed close behind, and the men ran screaming from the park. But as always, there were victims. One of Rabbit's babies had been shot. We realized these men would shoot at anything that moved. It seemed like nothing would stop them.
Then I saw the warden had returned. I saw his cat stretching in the spring sunshine and the washing on the line, and I reported the good news to Fox.
Yeah, for once we knew something the poachers didn't. When they came back, and of course they did come back, we knew what to do. The poachers didn't know about the warden, and the warden didn't know about the poachers. So it was up to us to bring them together. The birds relayed the message around the park. The poachers are here. Our moment had come. For the first time, the animals would round on the men, pushing them towards the warden's cottage.
And the brave Farthing Fox was to be their bait.
As before, I zigzagged through the trees. The men started shooting. The warden must have heard them. I was leading them towards the stream where the deer waited ready to charge. At the signal, Owl, Kestrel, and Whistler started dive-bombing the men. They didn't know what had hit them. They screamed blue murder and ran straight into the herd. Then, of course, the herd charged, driving them back. On and on they ran, birds in their hair, deer at their heels, and foxes snapping at their feet, till suddenly they were at the warden's cottage. He was already at the door, a gun in his hands, and his cat, the cat who'd brought us Badger's message, he was at his side, watching us, an amused expression in his eyes. Well, the poachers looked at the warden, and the warden looked at the poachers. Then he looked at us. Deer Foxes, a badger, birds, squirrels, hares, you name it, as mixed a bunch of animals as you ever saw, all standing behind the poachers, looking back at him.
The animals of Farthing Wood had changed the rest of us who lived in the park.
Together, we had done something that no one would have thought possible before we came.
Watch out!
Is that Toad he's carrying in his mouth?
I hope so.
I wish he'd carry me. Do you think he could carry me to the stars?
Whistler, is that Toad you've got there?
Don't speak!
Yes, it's... Oh, dear. Ouch!
Told you so.
Did you have to... Oh, no. No.
Whistler, when will you learn to land properly?
So sorry.
Poor Toad. He's probably killed him.
Toad, Toad, speak to me.
Fox, is that you?
Yes, Toad. Whistler went to get you. You were going back to Farthing Wood.
Was I? Oh, dear. What fell on me?
Whistler!
I don't know. Happens every year, matey. I wakes up from me winter sleep and wham! I go into a deep trance, and all I can think of is getting back to me own pond. Me own pond.
Oh, no, you don't. You belong here now, in White Deer Park.
Oh, yes, that's right, mateys. White Deer Park, I remember. Remember the first day May went off?
How could we forget?
That first spring we was here. I just wakened up. Adder wakened up too. And I saw her down at the pond, mateys, stretching out in the sun. But if she said hello, I never heard it. All I could hear was this voice saying over and over, "Gotta get back to Farthing Wood, gotta get back to Farthing Wood, to the pond where I was born." It was drawing me to it like a magnet. I left the park and started crossing the road, and on I went in a straight line, through fences and gardens and on and on. Then suddenly I was sailing through the air. I was in a boy's hand, and he dropped me plop into this glass jar. Then he put a lid on the jar and screwed it tight. Oh, lucky there was air holes in it, I can tell you. I jumped up and down, but the sides of the jar were slippery and I just fell back again. Then I noticed that the boy had put me down beside another jar in which there was another toad. We blinked at each other through the glass, and the next thing I knew, this other jar with this other toad in it was being whisked away. I looked up and I saw it sailing through the air. Funny, I thought.
Realising what had happened, we'd sent Whistler to get Toad, and off he went and he saw this toad in the jar. And of course, he thought it was our toad.
They all look alike to me. Thank you very much.
Anyway,
I picked it up.
Didn't the boy mind?
He didn't know. I'd crash-landed on top of him. Anyway, I brought this jar with this toad in it back to Fox's Earth. Unfortunately, I made rather a bad landing.
How unusual.
The glass broke and Toad hopped out, rather dazed.
that's not our Toad, I said.
So off I flew again. The boy ran off as I approached.
I wonder why.
Yeah, and this time I picked up the jar with our toad in it. But on arrival at Fox's Earth, I made rather a better landing than usual, and the jar did not break. I did offer to smash it on the ground,
Poor Toad.
but I was dissuaded. Next thing, I was sailing through the air again. I'm getting quite used to it, really, only this time. I was put down in front of the warden's house. By this time, I didn't know where I was.
You didn't know where you were in the first place.
And there was this huge ginger cat staring at me through the glass. I was scared stiff, mateys. Then the warden came and he picked up the jar and took the top off. He didn't want to put me down at first because Whistler was standing there waiting for his dinner, the man thought. But finally Whistler backed off. So the warden put me down on the ground. Was he surprised when I hopped straight towards Whistler and climbed into his beak? Then, before you can say, well, I never, I was flying through the air back to Fox's Earth.
The only problem now was how to keep him there. But we needn't have worried, need we, Toady?
Oh, mateys needn't have worried at all, because that other toad was a female. I didn't need to go back to Farthing Wood. My mate was right here in White Deer Park. And I've got to find her, mateys. Now. Got to find her now.
Toad, come back.
Now.
It's all right, Husky. This time, Toad's hopping in the right direction.
By now, all the creatures of the park had young.
Even Moley. This female mole, Mateless she was called, she turned up and she told us Mole had died in the winter. We were sad to lose our old friend and wondered how we were going to break the news to Badger. But we needn't have worried. Moley and Mateless had had a son, Mossy. Soon as he saw him, Badger took to him. "Hello, Moley," he said. "Where have you been? I've been looking for you everywhere."
You mean he thought Mossy was Moley?
That's the top and the bottom of it.
Stupid Badger.
And he wouldn't be told otherwise. As far as he was concerned, Mossy was Mole. And being sorry for his father's old pal, Mossy played along with him. All seemed to be well in our world. Vixen was teaching our young cubs to hunt. I remember she started with fir cones. But Bold just wouldn't share. He wanted that cone all to himself.
It's true. He just wouldn't be told, like somebody else I could mention.
Whoops.
Friendly was quite a different matter. The perfect cub.
Yuck.
Watch your tongue, boy.
Dreamer was a problem too. Like I said, she was always going off. Still, we thought she'd be safe on Farthing Land. Little did we know somebody was watching us.
I did, I knew. One day, when Fox was off somewhere, Vixen just couldn't get the cubs to sleep. She was tired and not really with it, and the cubs were acting up. It was then I saw him. I saw Scarface peering through the bushes, watching and waiting his chance. I dashed straight in and I started singing.
Oh, no!
Hush-a-bye, Foxy, deep in your earth. Time to put an end to your mirth. Oh, little foxies, including you, sleep through the daylight, even if they're blue.
Vixen thought she'd gone mad and tried to chase her off.
Then I told her, Scarface is watching you. But she said I was making it up.
Still, better safe than sorry.
That's what I said.
All right, keep your feathers on. So we asked Al to keep watch.
Yes, but I was very upset. You really hurt me.
And then I saw him.
Oh, yes, you believed her.
Nice day for spying, Scarface, I said. Do you know what he called me?
No, what?
A rat bag. Well, the rat bag flew at Scarface, hooting loudly. He backed off and got tangled in a bush, and Fox, running up, saw him.
And then they realised I'd been telling the truth.
Scarface was discontented with his own litter of cubs. It seemed to him that Fox's brood was stronger and better. There was only one blue cub which seemed promising, and that cub he named Ranger. Realizing her mate's dissatisfaction, Lady Blue decided to take a look at Fox's cubs for herself. Vixen saw her, and they had a confrontation. Vixen had left her cubs in the charge of her friends, but seeing his mother in trouble, as he thought, Bold ran up to defend her.
More courage than sense, that cub.
Like father, like son.
Are you referring to yourself or to Husky?
Does it matter? And then, Dreamer was found. Dead.
reason they all blame me.
Weasel being Weasel, we couldn't be sure if she was a double spy. You know, spying for Scarface and spying for us.
Mean ungrateful lot. And after I'd risked life and limb.
Oh,
Shut
shut
up,
up,
Weasel.
Weasel. Then Bold spoke up. He wanted me to avenge his sister's death. I tried to calm him down. You see, I knew it would do no good. Nobody wins a feud. But Bold wouldn't listen. He was growing up and his blood was hot. So he took off in a huff. Ada tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen to her either, and he crossed the boundary from Farthing Land. It was then he met Ranger. The two young foxes talked. Their first hasty words soon gave way to talk of peace. But unknown to them, Scarface was listening, and suddenly he jumped out in front of them. Bold tried to run clear, but other blue foxes ran in his path, till soon he was surrounded. Seeing this, Ada sought out Weasel and asked her to carry a message to Hare.
Well, I thought, why should I? Fox didn't deserve a weasel's loyalty. It served him right Scarface had got Bold.
So Ada slithered on, and coming across Hare, she asked him to carry the message. Hare bounded off in search of me, and he said, "Bold has been captured by Scarface." Well, what could I do? Accompanied only by Friendly, I had ordered all the other animals to stay behind. I went to Bold's rescue.
Meanwhile, Bold was in Scarface's earth, a guard at the entrance. There was no way he could fight his way out, so he pretended to be dying. The guard came in to see what was wrong. Then suddenly, Bold turned on him, rolling him onto his back and running out and away just as fast as he could.
Hooray!
Hooray indeed! Fox and Friendly arrived at Scarface's earth to confront him, to find Bold had already flown.
Yeah, it was like walking into a trap. It was looking all very nasty. Of course, all the Farthing creatures, small and weak as they were, had followed me in spite of my orders. I guess they would have followed me anywhere. But what could I, with one young fox, do against the whole tribe of Scarface's warriors? There could have been a massacre. Then, suddenly, Stag appeared.
Yes. Weasel had come to me, telling me what had happened.
Scarface has got a farthing cub. I expect he'll kill it, and then there'll be ructions. Fox won't stand for it, he won't.
When I arrived, I found the two sides drawn up, facing one another. I came between them. I reasoned with Scarface, reminding him how Fox had saved the deer herd, and that without the white deer there would be no park. We all owed him. Then I turned to Fox. Bold was clearly not with Scarface. Would he back down? Fox agreed. He turned and left the territory, wondering where Bold really was.
The other animals were all celebrating.
Fox is king of the castle. Scarface a dirty rascal.
Well, why shouldn't she sing for once? She'd saved my skin.
There's an old saying, Fox. It is easy to persuade a person of something he wants to believe.
Yeah, and I know another one. Credit where credit's due.
Hooray! Hooray!
But I was still worried about Bold. When I arrived back at my own earth to find him, large as life, preening himself as though nothing had happened.
He went potty.
I tore strips off him. I told him he had put all the animals in danger, not just me and Friendly, everyone. I told him, from now on, I said, you are going to toe the line, my lad. Speak only when you are spoken to.
Where have I heard that before?
Cheek!
And you will obey my orders at all times. Maybe I was too hard on him, I don't know. Anyway, he says to me, I can't live here. I need space, Dad. Space. I'm leaving. Vixen tried to stop him. You're too young to go off on your own, she pleaded. But he only said, this park isn't big enough for Dad and me. So I'm going. And he went.